It's so exciting to trace the origin of human beings. We weren't like this all the time. In fact, for most of the recorded history of Earth, we weren't there. The universe originated some 13.9 billion years ago. The Earth took shape some 4.5 billion years ago. And we've been living for just some thousand years. So it's truly remarkable that we've evolved so much in such a little time. And reptiles were before us, the birds were before us, mammals came a lot later, and lower forms of mammals gave rise to monkeys. In Africa, they were called Old World monkeys around some 100 million years back or even earlier. And these Old World monkeys, about 40 million years ago, spread out of Africa into Asia and Indonesia and other parts. They were all Old World monkeys. Around 20 million years ago, they found their way into South America and Central America, into the so-called New World. So these were called the New World monkeys. And it was around 10 million years ago that, or later actually, I think around 20 million years ago, that once these New World monkeys had gone out, the Old World monkeys which stayed back in Africa evolved into apes. So monkeys had this long tail, they were shorter, they had all the features that you see in monkeys today. In fact, as a matter of example, in India there are 19 species of monkeys, the most common one being the rhesus macaque, which is known as bandar in common language, also called rhesus monkey by the way, and the second common monkey being the grey langur, also called Hanuman. And we've heard those stories of the grey langur being used by locals to drive out the rhesus monkey. Around 4 species of these Old World monkeys in India are indigenous to India, including the lion-tailed macaque, famous monkey of Western Ghats with a lion-like tail. And there are lots of the spider monkey, for example, is a New World monkey found in Central America, South America, even up to Mexico. But in general, monkeys, I don't think they're found in Europe or North America. I'll have to check it though. And therefore I want to say that I'm no expert in these anthropological subjects, but I have read a number of articles lately and wish to share some knowledge that I've gained. So as to give you a perspective, if you're really interested, you can look up to more research, and it will definitely open a window of new knowledge for you. So about 10 or 20 million years back, these monkeys evolved into apes. Their shoulder blades straightened, their jaws changed, the tails vanished, most importantly. And we have lots of apes. Today we have apes such as chimpanzee, the orangutan, gorilla, bonobos. Human beings are apes because we don't have tails. We are primates, but we are apes. We also have some smaller apes. For example, in India, the hula gibbon is the only ape found in India. It's found in Northeast India. So that's a smaller ape. But today we say that human beings, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, and orangutans are the 5 great apes. None of these 5 great apes are found in India, for example, except human beings, of course, which are found everywhere in the world. Okay, so apes evolved out of monkeys, out of Old World monkeys, not the New World. And therefore, probably you don't have apes in South America, because there you have Old World monkeys, and apes did not evolve out of that. And you don't have apes in lots of parts. Just as I've said that India, being such a biodiverse country, doesn't have any of the great apes. It just has one small ape, hula gibbon, which is there in the northeastern part. So the evolution of apes from monkeys was very localized, so as to say. People say that it happened mostly in Africa, and some people, some of the scientists have actually studied the genetic diversity in different parts of the world, especially of human beings, through the study of mitochondrial DNA of fossils, because the nuclear DNA degrades. And they found out that the maximum genetic diversity is there in Africa, and therefore all of these life forms, whether apes or even modern humans must have originated in Africa and must have then emanated, spread out of Africa. So that's one theory that's called the replacement theory. I'll talk about it in a second. But that's how the apes evolved. And the ape, which was the common ancestor of chimpanzees and human beings, evolved some 6 million years back. So people think chimpanzees are the ancestors of humans. That's not true. There was a common ancestor which probably no longer exists. People have tried to make all sorts of imageries out of it, taking the picture of a human being and the picture of a chimpanzee and bonobo and mixing them in Adobe Photoshop, for example, and try to make all sorts of imageries. But there was this common ancestor of chimpanzee, of bonobos, and of human beings. This common ancestor was there 6 million years ago, and from there onwards, human beings evolved in an independent line. From there onwards, all the apes which were in the line of human beings are called hominids. So we had the Ardipithecus, the Australopithecus, and 2 million years back, there was a hominid called Homo erectus, which could stand erect, which could have a lot of features which modern humans have, which could hunt, which could make basic tools. So that was the first time we had an ape which resembled a human, could think like a human, and the human evolution of the modern humans in the truest sense began at that time 2 million years ago. And independently, the chimpanzees and the bonobos were evolving. So chimpanzees are our cousins, they are not our predecessors. Anyway, let's go back to Homo erectus. Homo erectus was different in different parts of the world. There's in China it is called the pecking man, and in Indonesia there's an island called Flores that's called Homo florescentium. Pardon me if I haven't pronounced it properly, but these were little 3.5-inch hominids in this island of Flores, and they were also Homo erectus most probably, or probably evolved from Homo erectus. Of course, there are different species. If you call them Homo florescentium, then it's not equal to Homo erectus. That's a different species. The genus is same, but the species is different. So it might have evolved from Homo erectus. So you had all these kinds of different species in the human history. And that was around 2 million years ago when Homo erectus was there. Some people say that Homo erectus evolved in Africa because old world monkeys evolved into apes, and that common ancestor must have been there in Africa, most probably East Africa. So Homo erectus evolved in Africa, spread out to the rest of the old world, not the new world. But there are some people who say that Homo erectus independently evolved in different parts of the world. It's debatable and depends on what kind of fossils we find. If we can find a very old 1.5 million year old Homo erectus fossil, say in India, then theories might change, so long as we haven't found out Homo erectus fossils long enough, or old enough rather, in any place except in Africa. We have to admit the theory of this African emergence. So Homo erectus was there about 1 million years ago. This Homo erectus evolved further, and it evolved into something called the Homo Heidelbergensis. So there's a place called Heidelberg in Germany. From there, these fossils have been found. So this Homo Heidelbergensis was very pivotal. Some people say that Homo erectus evolved into Homo antecessor, which further evolved into Homo Heidelbergensis. But whatever happened, this Homo Heidelbergensis went to Europe, and after about 500,000 years, it would evolve into the Neanderthals. This Homo Heidelbergensis went to Asia and would evolve into what you can call Denisovans. And this Homo Heidelbergensis, which stayed in Africa, evolved into Homo Sapiens. So this Homo Heidelbergensis was the common ancestor of Neanderthals, of Denisovans, and of the modern human Homo Sapiens. So that seems pretty interesting. So I'm not going to give exact timelines, but an approximate timeline to make the concepts clear, to make the concepts absolutely pictorially clear. So just imagine, around 600 million years ago, the Homo Heidelbergensis was there in Africa, and around 600 million years ago, this Homo heidelbergensis went to Europe in large numbers. It went to Asia in large numbers, and around 400,000 years ago, around 600,000 years ago, this Homo heidelbergensis went out of Africa into Europe and Asia, and around 400,000 years ago, this Homo heidelbergensis started evolving. In Africa, it started evolving into Homo sapiens. In Europe, it started evolving into Neanderthals, and in Asia, it started evolving into the Denisovan man. And around 200,000 years ago, this evolution was more or less complete. In other words, now in Africa, you had only Homo sapiens. Now in Europe, you had almost completely Neanderthals, and now in Asia, you had almost completely Denisovans. So why I'm saying almost completely in Asia and Europe, but completely in Africa, is because some population of Homo erectus, although wiped out of Africa, was still present in Asia and Europe right up to 500,000 years ago, when they were completely lost. But predominantly we had Neanderthals in Europe and Denisovans in Asia. So when we had that sort of a situation, they lived, they adapted. The Neanderthals had shorter, heavier bodies to meet the cold, and the Denisovans were adapted similarly in the case of Asia. Just remember, this was the age, the Ice Age. The Ice Age continued throughout this period right up to 10,000 years ago, when the Ice Age stopped. And what do you mean by the Ice Age? Large continents such as Europe were completely covered in ice sheets. It's only the edges, the margins of these continents, which had some space or some coastal influence so as to allow a habitable environment. And slowly it melted. By the end of the Ice Age, it had almost completely melted. And now we see it's completely habitable. So climate change keeps happening, and it is postulated that a lot of years from now, Antarctica and Arctic both will be habitable. The equator will not be habitable because it will become so warm. In fact, something similar happened at that point of time, which makes me go back to 200,000 years ago. So by 200,000 years ago, this huge evolution had happened. The Homo sapiens had completely dominated Africa, and they lived in Africa from 200,000 years ago to 100,000 years ago. They didn't go anywhere, they lived there, all right? But during this period about 140,000 years ago, something terrible happened in Africa. A drought-like condition, a mega drought happened, a lot of heat. The entire continent of Africa became almost uninhabitable, except for some portions of South Africa. And the Homo sapiens vastly reduced in numbers. Only some 500 or 600 of them were left. They were on the very brink of extinction, as you can imagine. So they had to forcefully leave Africa. They adapted themselves. They developed all sorts of tools, even to hunt fish, and therefore became much intelligent than the Neanderthals of Europe or the Denisovans of Asia. And they developed all these modern thinking processes. Over 100,000 years, they really became smart. They became slim and tall, unlike short and heavy Neanderthals. And by 100,000 years ago, Africa became so uninhabitable, they had to spread out of it. Just a few of them, 400 or 500 of them. In fact, some people say that it started with one Homo sapiens in Africa. And by tracing the mitochondrial matrilineal lineage DNA, they have traced a mitochondrial Eve, who was the mother of all the Homo sapiens that we have today. So all of these theories are there in anthropology. Anyway, some 400 or 500 or 600 of these Homo sapiens went out of Europe and formed the 8 billion people that we have in the world today. Wow. Anyway, so 100,000 years ago they went out, and this is the important thing to imagine. Within 50,000 years, within 60,000 years to be more precise, from 100,000 years to 40,000 years ago, within this period, they will wipe out the Neanderthals, they will wipe out the Denisovans, they will wipe out any remnants of the Homo erectus or any other species. There was, I don't know if there is any other species that hasn't been discovered till now, but they will wipe out, and Homo sapiens, by 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens will be the only species surviving throughout the world. What happened in these 60,000 years? First of all, let me talk about a climate event because it is minor, and then I'll move to other topics. A volcano erupted in the Tonga island of Indonesia. It was so massive that there was a volcanic winter for several years. That was around 70,000 years ago. And people say that that was responsible for the extinction of the Denisovans in Asia at least, and maybe some other remnants of the Homo erectus. Homo erectus was predominated in Middle East at that time. So its effects were large. We don't really have the clues, but climate change played a role. Point number one. Point number two. These Homo sapiens were slim and they were well adapted in so many respects. They wiped out the Neanderthal. Then they came to Asia, they wiped out the Denisovans. So this is called the replacement theory, that they replaced all of these people. Some people say that we don't believe in the replacement theory. We believe in something called the regional continuity theory or the regional evolution theory, that we had the Homo erectus in different parts of the world and they independently evolved into different species, intermediate species, until the Homo sapiens was born. So in Europe they evolved into Homo Heidelbergensis, then into the Neanderthals, then into Homo sapiens. In Asia they evolved into the Denisovans, then into Homo sapiens. So independently Homo sapiens came out from these regional species. We may say that how is this possible? If all the regional species independently evolved, they would have evolved into something else. How did all of them evolve into the same Homo sapiens? Because this theory of regional connectivity states that all of these different regions were interconnected. That is, interbreeding kept occurring among the different species, intermediate species, and that is why, because interbreeding was actively happening between all the species of the world, the final end result is Homo sapiens. So this also has its critics, but it gives room for thinking that it's not just Africa which has been like an engine pumping out Homo sapiens in different waves, because when Homo sapiens came out of Africa, they came out 100,000 years ago, 90,000 years ago, 80,000 years ago, 70,000 years. So they came out in waves, just like an engine pumps out water. So according to this theory, it's not Africa which has the proprietary right to claim as the cradle of human civilization. We have different regions, but it's a matter of research, I would say. Till now, scientists are more in favor of that African replacement theory. But there is another theory which is supported by some recent research, and that is an assimilation theory, which is actually a middle path between the two theories. And the assimilation theory states that when the Homo sapiens came out of Africa, they interbred with the Neanderthals over a period of 50-60,000 years. They interbred with the Denisovans of Asia over a period of 50-60,000 years. And by 40,000 years ago, we had a mixed species with genome of Neanderthals, with genome of this African emanated species, and now we have Homo sapiens. So that is the assimilation theory. And the recent researchers, there's a scientist, famous scientist, in 2008-9, I had heard about him. He was studying the mitochondrial DNA of the Neanderthals and had sequenced the genome of Neanderthals using mitochondrial DNA, because nuclear DNA will degrade. And he found out there are certain genes, especially the gene of speech, present in Neanderthals. And he found out, according to not just him but also research by other scientists, that there are parts of the Neanderthal genome in us. So by the time the African Homo sapiens went out, by the time they came out to northern Europe, it was slightly late. So the people of northern Europe may be having some more Neanderthals genes. So by the time the Homo sapiens came into India, by the time they went into Indonesia, for example, which was far away, it was too late. So there must be considerable Denisovan genome in the Indonesian modern humans. So all those kind of theories emanated. So Svante Pabo in 2022 won the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology for his research, quite deservingly. So this is so fascinating. And in this period, 50,000 years ago to 40,000 years ago, which was the last vestige of Neanderthals and Denisovans, there was the Mesolithic period. So the old Stone Age or the Paleolithic period. The Paleolithic or the Stone Age is actually divided into the old period, the middle period, and the new period. The middle period of the Stone Age is called Mesolithic, which lasted for a little while, 40,000 years ago to 50,000 years ago. It was during this time. It was during this time that some small tools or mesoliths, flake-like tools, were developed by humans, of course by Homo sapiens, and that might also have given an advantage to these Homo sapiens. And some people claim that Denisovans stayed up to 25,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 15,000 years ago. Whatever happened, the concept is now clear in your mind. And what really happened? Around 10,000 years ago, the Ice Age ended and the Bering Strait became more accessible, navigable, and huge populations of Homo sapiens now entered North America through Alaska, and they also entered Australia. So you must have read about the Pleistocene Megafauna, which was this huge species of mammoths and giant sloths and saber-toothed tigers. All of them were living at that point of time, 15,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. And as soon as these human beings entered, and after the Stone Age, we had something called the microlith period, from 10,000 years ago to 8,000 years ago, in which microliths, or small flint flake-like tools, if you've watched the Flintstones, these are the Flintstones that they made. So they were very sharp tools made of bone and stone and fixed on shaft and then used as projectiles. So they used to kill big mammoths, big saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths, and over a period of 1,000 or 2,000 years, all of these creatures were extinct in North America and in Australia. So the extinction was pretty mild in Africa from where they originated, but by the time they went into the extremes, some people say probably because they had more genetic diversity, they took on the Neanderthals, they took on the Denisovan genes, and they became really smart. So by the time they went into these extremes, they became really smart with lots of advanced tools, and they caused this huge scale extinction. Some people say that today the kind of extinction that is happening in the 19th century beginning, around 400 or I think 40 million bisons were there in the North American prairies, and by the end of the 19th century, just a couple of hundred of them remained. So this happened for a lot of species over the last 100, 200 years. So people say that the kind of technological developments that we are having, especially after the Industrial Revolution, resembles that of what happened during that period when the Pleistocene ended and the Holocene period started 10,000 years back. So we have to be extra cautious, because what happens when we went to the Flores Islands, when Homo sapiens went to the Flores Islands, if you've read J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, 3.5 feet, or if you've read Gulliver's Travels, in which Lilliputians were there. So these creatures was very similar to those hobbits, and you might say that survival of the fittest, natural selection, they went away because Homo sapiens were more fit. But they might be having some genes which could have prevented us against so many diseases. Maybe they could have had some gene that could give us immunity against the coronavirus, and we didn't have that. Because of that, we suffered so much in the coronavirus pandemic. A lot of genes that Homo sapiens inherited from the Neanderthals as part of most probably interbreeding has given us immunity against so many strains of influenza and so many strains of measles, which has enabled us to live beyond a certain period of years, enhanced our lifespan. And people say, why is the lifespan of a human being 80 years, 90 years, maximum 100 years? Why not 500 years? Why is the lifespan of a tortoise 200, 250 years, but not of a human being? They can give all kinds of theories, metabolism and everything, but at the root of it, you have evolution. If we could have had certain genes which could drive the right physiology, prevent us from the right diseases, maybe the average age of the human being might have been 200 years, or maybe 1,000 years. Just remember, the average age of the Neanderthal was about 25 years, or even less. Average age might have been less. Very few people actually lived beyond 30. So things are different. Evolution, if we can take on the genes, if we can preserve genetic diversity, it is always good. And that's why there is so much focus on preserving biodiversity. Because if genetic diversity is lost, it's very bad. In fact, the kind of genetic diversity that was there 50,000 years ago, some numbers of Homo erectus were living, Denisovans were living, the Neanderthals were living, and Homo Sapiens were living. At the same time, in our planet, 4 different hominids were living. Today, there is only one. And the kind of genetic diversity that we have as Homo Sapiens is pretty less compared to what the Neanderthals had or Homo erectus had. Homo erectus lived for about 2 million years. We've been living just for a few thousands of years. You might say that we have been living for 200,000 years, 400,000 years. But the main evolution that happened in our genes happened over the last 40, 50,000 years. Because that's when we faced the change of the ice age into the modern climate. That's when a lot of travel happened. The Homo sapiens traveled all across the world. And most of our evolution happened during that point of time. We are evolving even today. We've evolved a lot over the last 10,000 years. And who knows, we might be evolving into Homo sapiens futurists in the next thousands of years. But the fact of the matter is very clear that if we could have had some good genes during this process of evolution, our lifespan would have been quite different. We never know. We could have had certain qualities. Our eyesight could have been much better. The human eyesight is one of the weakest in the animal kingdom. So a lot of features depends on the course of evolution, which was not in our hands. And the same force of evolution resulted in the extinction of so many hominids. So these are pretty interesting topics, actually. And the theory of expansion out of the old world is also pretty interesting. So I won't stretch it any longer. Maybe I can talk about some cultures, the kind of tools that ancient human beings, Homo sapiens, used, the kind of cultures that they lived in, the kind of potteries that they made, all of these things, the kind of paintings that they made in the caves, all of these things are important. Lastly, I'll talk about the Cro-Magnon man. The Cro-Magnon man is nothing but the Homo sapiens of about 25,000 years ago, found in the Cro-Magnon rock shelter of France. So since it is Homo sapiens, the same species as us, if we go back in the time machine, we can interbreed with that Cro-Magnon man. But then it had different body structure, which shows that human beings have been evolving over the last 10 or 20,000 years, despite we are still Homo sapiens. But natural selection is happening. And during the coronavirus pandemic, a huge wave of natural selection happened. Those who were weak perished due to any comorbidity or whatever, no matter how ruthless it sounds, but this is the reality. And when we made the vaccine, we have two ways. Either we kill the antigen or we develop immunity. Either you remove difficulties in your life or you develop resistance to those difficulties. So we chose to remove the coronavirus. How? The coronavirus is spreading from one human being to another, creating an epidemic, creating a pandemic, a health situation of global concern. And what we did, we started vaccinating people so that the coronavirus could not propagate any further, its reproduction number reduced, and it died, because contagious nature of the coronavirus is a recipe for its survival. So if this contagion is removed by means of social isolation, by means of vaccination, then it perishes. And that's how the coronavirus pandemic ended, because of vaccination. So we didn't develop natural immunity against that, but we removed this. We have an acquired immunity against the coronavirus today. If it stays in our bodies, well and good, but it will not stay in our offsprings. Our offsprings will have to be vaccinated against coronavirus. But if it becomes a part of our genome, it will be transmitted, the immunity will be transmitted to our offsprings. And that is the most important thing. If we can immunize our genome, then we don't need these vaccinations. And immunization of our genome happens either through evolution or maybe through some advanced human genetic engineering. which is probably not discovered, or might be that the research is underway. So you can just understand how interesting is the perspective of thinking on these lines. How interesting. And we start with the evolution. There are some fossils from the Denisova cave in Siberia, the Denisovans found. Then from the Neander Valley in Germany, the Neanderthals fossils were found. Then from the Cro-Magnon rock shelter in France, the Cro-Magnons fossils were found. So you can imagine, from the study of these fossils and from understanding our lineage, and then from Darwin's theory, and then from genetics, such a beautiful perspective to our history and to our future can be imagined. That's it, man. Meet you all in the next podcast with similarly more exciting topics. So until then, follow Beacon, share and like Beacon Podcast. Thank you.